I have the honor of introducing our Infrastructure Task Force member, Rita Connerly, to say a few words.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, I'm Rita Connerly. I am a volunteer on the Infrastructure Task Force Committee. The Infrastructure Task Force Committee was created by Aurora City Council in order to seek input from the citizens as to what the challenges are in infrastructure and what your thoughts really are in trying to overcome those challenges. The Infrastructure Task Force is co-chaired by two city council members, Councilmember Curtis Gardner and Councilmember Francoise Bergen. Today we're talking about transportation, but I really want to encourage all of you to attend all the Infrastructure Task Force meetings that we have, because while this meeting is focused on connecting people to places, whether they want to go by foot, bike, public transit, or car, there are other foundations to infrastructure to connect people to people. And whether that might be in a library or at a rec center, creating healthy environments for parks, active recreational facilities in our parks or along our trails, and making sure that we provide safe communities so that we have public facilities that are in close proximity to our communities to respond appropriately to any concerns. So thank you. I've met some of you from the last Infrastructure Task Force meeting, but thank you for coming. We value your opinion, and we really want to hear from you today about what challenges you see and what pathways you see to overcome those challenges. So take advantage. It's very interactive. Ask questions, provide solutions, and we thank you for your time tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Rita. So quickly, we have a short presentation to give you all. And so through this presentation, we will talk through the Build Up Aurora process, an overview, provide an overview of each of the capital project priorities in the transportation space, and certainly save room for question and answer throughout. So before we get started, I'm just going to quickly talk through what is infrastructure and what we're focused on today. So the first, capital investments. So in the city, we have what's called capital investments and we have what's called operating investments. So capital investments are really focused on physical things like buildings, roads, and parks. These capital expenditures in the city include projects that are multi-years that improve things like buildings, parks, and roads, as well as construction of new infrastructure. This is the space in which we are focused on today. We also have what we call operating investments in the city. And those are the things that run the city's daily business and services. So that includes the staff that go out and pave our streets, that includes supplies to run city operations, and then lastly, that includes day-to-day maintenance of our roads, parks, and bridges to make sure they're operating well. This slide shows you the broad breadth of all of the assets that the city owns and maintains. So we have currently 98 bridges, over 4,300 lane miles that we maintain. We have more than 140 city facilities and over 380 traffic signals that we operate. And obviously this list is growing every year. There are several ways that cities pay for capital projects. The first is through our annual budget. We call this pay as you go. Through the annual budget, the city receives revenues that we program on an annual basis to fund capital needs in the city. So that's everything from street paving to improving a park or replacing a playground in a park. We also pursue grant opportunities. So there have been many grant opportunities that the city is able to apply for. These are competitive and are not guaranteed, but we try our best effort to apply for as many grant funding as we can to address a lot of our infrastructure needs to the extent that they're available. And the last tool is what's called bonds. So bonds operate like a mortgage on a house. So when you buy a new house, you take out what's called a mortgage, you borrow from a bank, and you pay a monthly mortgage payment. Bonds work the same way. Bonds are where city borrows funds for major projects, and these are repaid over time with interest, just like your monthly mortgage payment. The city has to collect sufficient taxes to cover the cost of that payment. And most importantly, bonds require voter approval. So these are ballot questions that you vote on during an election. And these questions include specific projects that the bond funds have to be spent on. And that is a contract between the city and its residents, in that the city will deliver these projects that are promised with the funds from bonds if voters approve them. Over the last couple of years, the city has undertaken several capital master planning efforts to really understand the city's capital needs, both the condition of our infrastructure, our growth needs in the city, as well as hear from the public around what they value most. This slide demonstrates the various capital master plans that have been completed, all of which has come together today with the variety of projects that you see around the room that we'll talk through in a couple of slides. The master planning effort has also informed the development of a draft 10-year capital master plan. This capital master plan totals $1.9 billion in total and exceeds what the city can afford to do within our annual budget. The cost of a lot of these projects exceed what we have annually, and as you'll see here, are fairly large in nature. So over the last several years, the city has made a concerted effort to identify infrastructure strategies while building trust with the public on delivering capital projects on time and within budget. We started this conversation in 2022 with the paving of residential streets. And at that point in time, our pavement condition had greatly decreased and residential streets had not been paved in many years. The city reviewed the condition of all of our streets and identified streets that were in the greatest need of rehabilitation. That resulted in the city borrowing $35 million to catch up with residential paving needs, address those streets in the worst condition, and then program dollars in our annual budget to keep up with the paving of our residential streets. At that same time, we also benefited from the infrastructure bill. The city took a look at the infrastructure bill and the various funding opportunities that presented. We had a matchmaking exercise, which actually several of the projects that are around the room were part of that effort, and applied for funds to help address and get started on phases of our projects. So for example, the city received design funds for several projects on the wall to progress them forward as a first step. And we were very successful through grant applications over that period of time. That has really led us to where we are today. Grant funding, unfortunately, is not sustainable. It's not guaranteed, as well as needs that exceed our annual budget, has resulted in a concerted effort to educate the public on our infrastructure needs, have the public understand competing priorities that the city has, as well as identify funding options to begin to address these needs, which led to the City Council unanimously creating the Infrastructure Task Force in July of 2024. This slide shows the members that sit on our Infrastructure Task Force that is chaired by our Councilmember Curtis Gardner and co-chaired by Councilmember Francois Bergen. And the sole purpose and mission of this group is to evaluate the city's infrastructure needs and look at short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions to address these needs while engaging the community on community feedback, input, and support. This slide demonstrates the process that the Infrastructure Task Force has undertaken over the last year. There has been a lot of education and conversation from departments with the Infrastructure Task Force about the city's capital project needs, as well as community engagement that the city engaged in over the last year to begin to understand what the community values most. That has led us here today through the series of meetings that the city is hosting with the Infrastructure Task Force that are continuing through this week, the outcome of which will inform the Infrastructure Task Force's recommendation to City Council. This slide shows the amount of outreach that was done in the last year. So there was a concerted effort to really try to meet people where they are, attending a festival in a park, through survey responses. We had over 3,500 plus direct interactions and over 2,600 online survey responses. We also held a series of facilitated conversations to really unpack and engage one-on-one with our residents on what they value most and understand needs and concerns when it came to infrastructure in the city. 3 themes that rose from that initial engagement period are public safety. This goes beyond just traditional police and fire response. We also heard a lot about the public around transportation safety. So safe pedestrian crossings, sidewalks, lighting in areas along our roads. We also heard roadway improvements were a top priority as well. Traffic calming came through a lot in our resident feedback, which is why transportation infrastructure is also listed here as a major theme, which is a reason why many of you are here today. And then last is parks and recreation. So a strong response and need for additional access to recreation facilities and parks in the city. So the next part of our presentation is hearing from our Public Works Department on priority transportation needs in the city that have risen from decades of need that have been on our list unfunded for many, many years, as well as through a recent effort to develop the city's first multimodal transportation master plan. And through that effort, that is Brandon Connecting Aurora, we heard a lot from our residents around infrastructure needs, a lot of which is actually represented in this room. So as we walk through each of the projects and their associated scope, I ask you to adopt a prioritization lens. And so as you're hearing an overview of each of these projects, ask yourself the question, do these projects reflect the critical needs of what I see in my neighborhood and across the city? Following the presentation, we are going to ask you to identify and rank your top 5, which is not an easy task. So begin to think through what matters most to you and why as you're listening to the overviews of the various project needs. This input, again, will help us prioritize our 10-year capital plan, as well as inform the Infrastructure Task Forces on their recommendations to City Council, which could include a potential bond package. So jumping into the projects, a quick overview of Connecting Aurora. I mentioned it's our first multimodal transportation master plan. We were very fortunate to receive grant funds to do this effort, which has been ongoing for the last 2.5 years. And this plan really creates a vision for the city's transportation network and guides investment in bikes, pedestrian, transit. It also sets forth development, design, and delivery of our future infrastructure and strives to improve safety, which, as you'll see here, safety is the #1 thing we heard from those that engaged in the Connecting Aurora process as depicted by the large dot on the visual on the screen. Through this process, we have over 800,000 touch points throughout the community, 500 open house attendees, and over 2,500 survey responses. So this was one of the most engaged processes that the city has had, certainly in defining our infrastructure future. I referenced the Build Up Aurora community engagement that occurred last year. This slide demonstrates a little bit more specificity on what we heard from those that participated in that process. So through our series of facilitated conversations, 60% almost of those participants provided transportation infrastructure ideas. We also, as I mentioned earlier, heard a lot about the need for safe and maintained roadways, traffic calming, speed control, sidewalk improvements, better pedestrian crossings, as well as the need to accommodate capacity in the city and the traveling public through our roadway network. This slide quickly shows back in 2022, our residential streets. We had, as you can see here, a large deficit in the need to address our residential street paving. And this was determined by measuring the condition of all of our streets. So every year we send out or not every year, every so many years, we send out a sophisticated machine that measures the condition of all of the streets' roads, or all the city's roads. And that results in a numeric value that defines what condition it's in. So that numeric value is from 0, which means a road doesn't exist, it's a dirt road, to 100, which means it was just paved yesterday. It's perfect. So in 2009, we were at 77, which is in the good range. We did not pave residential streets for many years, which brought us down to a 69, which is fair condition. And as of today, post our efforts, listening to the public on their need to pave residential streets, identifying funding solutions, we're excited to share that we're at 79, which is back up to the good value and one of the highest pavement conditions that the city has had. This slide shows the projects that we're about to walk you through. Just for lay of the land, we have a number identifier here, and that number identifier is easily shown on each of the boards around the room. So as we're talking through the projects, remember the number identifier, certainly as you're thinking through which priorities resonate most with you. So without further ado, I will introduce our Public Works Director, Kurt Muehlmeyer, to walk you through the transportation needs.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate it. As Laura said, my name is Kurt Muehlmeyer. I'm the Director of Public Works for the City of Aurora. I also want to just take a quick minute to introduce my Deputy Director of Project Delivery, Cindy Culp, Deputy Director of Transportation Mobility, Ms. Carly Campuzano. They'll be helping me answer questions here at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to go through these 15 projects relatively quickly. There will be time at the end for questions, so if you can, just hold your questions till the end. So first question, or first project, is a 13th Avenue multimodal. You're going to hear the word multimodal a lot tonight, and what we mean by multimodal is that it's designed to impact cars, pedestrians, and bikes. It's not solely for one mode of transportation or the other. So 13th Avenue multimodal project. In 13th Avenue, we're talking about is Potomac to Peoria, that stretch of road. So the total cost for this one is $25 million. We do have a small pilot project area that's in front of Vaughn Elementary School, if you can see that, to narrow the road, improve crosswalks, and improve both pedestrian, bike, and car travel through this corridor. The next one is ADA barrier removal. And just for reference, ADA, we're talking about curb ramps, pedestrian push buttons, and sidewalks. So there are over 27,000 curb ramps in this city, 1,700 miles of sidewalks, and about 2,000 push buttons. Many of those do not meet current ADA standards. They are built long before the current ADA standards were in existence, and so we're in need of updating all of those. So this project is not a standalone, it's to supplement the ADA replacement with many of these other projects that we have in the works. So Alameda Bridge over I-225. So as Laura mentioned, there are almost 100 bridges in the city. So those bridges are looked at, evaluated, inspected at least every 2 years and given a score. The Alameda Bridge over 225 is one of our lowest ranking bridges. It carries a tremendous amount of traffic. That's a major corridor for the city. You can see from some of the pictures there, some of the issues with the cracking of the slab. It has narrow sidewalks and it continues to be a choke point for traffic in that corridor. So the design is already underway. It's grant funded. We do not have construction funding at this time. So the 45 million indicated there would be for construction. So the Complete Streets project, so this is to fill in areas where sidewalks and roads do not exist or are not built to their full capacity. These are smaller projects across multiple wards to where, they're small but mighty, right? We're gonna improve connections and drivability, walkability in these corridors and areas. So the Gun Club, Quincy to Aurora Parkway multimodal, there's a multimodal again, safety improvement. So this is Gun Club Road south of Quincy. So our latest studies show that this road, it's currently a 2-lane configuration, carries 2.5 times the amount of traffic that road was designed to carry. So this project is to widen it. $34 million is construction costs, as the design was also grant funded. So this would be to construct this. There's also some short-term solutions that are in there, traffic signals and other areas to make some short-term safety improvements. The high priority missing sidewalks, this is an ongoing program, similar to the project before the last one I mentioned. This one fills in sidewalks that don't exist. The example given here is Laredo Street north of Colfax. And so this project is going to take high priority. And when I say by that, high priority, that's deemed by its location to transit, shopping, schools, places where sidewalks are really needed but don't currently exist. Intersection safety and traffic calming citywide. So traffic calming is a very frequent request. We intake about 33 requests every year. We only have current budget to implement about 10 to 15 of those. And typically those are the lower cost ones. So you can see the speed cushions there in the right-hand side and radar feedback signs. So those are the lower cost ones. This project is going to construct roundabouts along with 2 new traffic signals and then allow us to complete the traffic calming requests that are currently unfunded. So the Montview, Peoria to Fitzsimmons multimodal improvements. So this has been deemed a corridor where you have lots of mixed use of transportation. So you have cars, you have pedestrians, you have bikes, all using this corridor because of its proximity to the Fitzsimmons campus. And so what this project would do, and it's already designed, would construct the cross section that you can see in the corner there. So 3 lanes of travel, wide sidewalks, a divided bike lane to improve kind of connectivity in the entire area. We did apply for a grant for construction for this last year. We were unsuccessful. We will be reapplying to hopefully offset some of the costs for this project, but the $35 million is for the full cost. So Northwest Alley Paving Program, this is an ongoing program. So the city has around 300 alleys. About 2/3 of those are paved, 1/3 is not. And so this project would complete the remaining 1/3 of alleys in 10 years. If we don't use this, it's going to take us between 20 and 30 years to complete this one. So this paves the alleys. This helps offset maintenance costs. Our public works crews constantly have to go to those dirt alleys to keep them up, grade them to make sure that they're travel ready for vehicles. So this helps short and long-term costs. The Peoria Bridge over Sand Creek. So I mentioned we rate our bridges, and 225 over Alameda was one of the worst. This is the worst rated bridge in the city of Aurora. And so it is also in design at the moment, thanks to a grant. $35 million is construction costs. So this bridge would be widened. Right now it's a 4-lane bridge and you have 6 lanes north and south. So it's a choke point for the traffic along Peoria as well. This is a big one, $168 million for Gun Club, airport to Yale. And so actually what we're talking about is 6th Avenue. It's actually State Highway 30, which is 6th Avenue, which turns into Gun Club. It's currently a CDOT roadway, but we realize it's a choke point. It's for the city. It's a 2-lane road. It carries far more traffic than it was ever designed to. And so this project would design and construct a 4-lane configuration all the way from along Gun Club, from Yale all the way up to Airport. Signal sign marking and lighting maintenance. So as Laura mentioned very early on, so we have close to 300 signals, 400 signals in the city. Many of them were built many years ago and are requiring upgrading, maintenance, repairs. So this project addresses deferred maintenance in signals, signs, and markings. We have miles and miles and miles of striping, marking that needs to be repaired, replaced. So the Tower Road 6 to Colfax extension. So this road currently does not exist. It is obviously forces traffic onto the other roadway. So this would build a 4-lane section through this road, $71 million to design and construct this one. Similarly, this is just north of that one. So Tower Road from Colfax to I-70. This is currently a 2-lane road. There's a tremendous amount of truck traffic in this area trying to access I-70 up there on the north. So this would make a 4-lane section through this corridor as well, taking some of the traffic away from Airport and other kind of major arterials in the area. So last but not least is the Traffic Safety and Technology Project. So this kind of modernizes our city traffic signal system. And many people, I find, do not appreciate traffic signals until they're not working, right? Then you appreciate a traffic signal. So this one, for sure, is an important one. It can implement technology that can make traveling around easier just by introducing technology into our traffic signal system. And so that is the last project. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has. Yes, sir? Do you want the mic?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Some of these projects appear to be in areas that are currently under additional development. For example, the on-shoots.
The Fitzsimmons?
Exactly, yeah.
Yep.
The Fitzsimmons. So I've seen some of the Fitzsimmons master plans for redeveloping the whole golf course. Is there a possibility that some of that development can be used to fund upgrading the infrastructure?
Do you want to take that one?
So yes, and it's not enough. So we have 2 tools that we have in the city. So developers, when they come in and they develop a new site, they have what's called public improvement requirements that they have to do, where they're required to install sidewalks, they're required to upgrade a road that's adjacent to their site. So they do have public improvement obligations that they undertake. In addition to that, the city does collect transportation impact fees as well. And so through that, those are used on regional transportation infrastructure to support the development going in. So those are 2 tools that the city has for new growth in the city to support transportation infrastructure.
So does this essentially represent the deficit between what that is going to collect and what is needed to actually make
Yes.
improvements?
So I'll use Gun Club Road as an example. Up and down Gun Club Road, there are various developments going in, and so a lot of those have public improvement obligations that they need to make for Gun Club Road, but it's only for the segment in front of their development. So the entire corridor of Gun Club Road needs to be addressed, and so this would be, essentially addressing the city's requirement for that.
Other questions? Yes?
I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. The 13th Avenue is between Potomac and Peoria.
Correct.
That's going to be fun, because I live at Revere, 13th and Revere. So, I just wonder if I should sell my house before this starts, or figure out another way to, I'm joking.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out
Sure.
cars, and then they park on both sides of the street. So, you may not want to get into detail, I'm not sure how that design works.
Do you want to talk about it? Go ahead.
I'll try to answer that. I'm Carly, Deputy Director in the Public Works Department. So for 13th, we looked at different alternatives, and there was a corridor study done for that project. I forget the exact years of the corridor study. I think it was post, I want to say post-COVID, so let's call that like 2022, 2023. But there were different alternatives developed. We looked at all sorts of cross-section solutions, and what we came up with is widening the sidewalks on both sides. You live there, you know how narrow the sidewalks are, and so bringing both sidewalks up to ADA compliance, and then widening one sidewalk to be even wider, hopefully about 8 feet through the corridor to also accommodate bikes is the plan. And we have a concept plan on the city's website that we can go over, and I can zoom in on the area near your house if you want to see the impacts. But we're also working through some of the design details now, and when we work through the design for these types of things, we really try to decrease impacts or minimize impacts as much as we can to property owners. And if a driveway is impacted, we would definitely need to approach about an easement or how that would work. And we've successfully worked with property owners on other sidewalk widening projects, and sometimes they appreciate getting part of their driveway reconstructed and having a slightly wider sidewalk. So we can go over some of the details, but there were about 3, I think, concepts that we reviewed and went over with the public, and it had its own outreach for that project.
You widen the sidewalks. Are you gonna take part of my yard, which would be okay? 'Cause I don't have or are you gonna make 13th more narrow?
It could be both and kind of depend on the characteristics of the yard. Do you know more about the design details on this? I don't think we would take your yard, but normally a lot of property owners don't know exactly where the right-of-way to their yard ends. And sometimes we need a temporary easement for construction that we would pay the property owner for. And what, I don't know what else you have to add.
So they're currently working on identifying the 1 mile section that will go to final design. And when we get into those details, we'll have a much better idea of how the sidewalk will be widened, what the impacts will look like for this 1 mile pilot section that we'll be installing with the grant funding that we have. I'll also clarify that the limits are from Potomac to Yosemite, the Denver line, basically along 13th. So it is a larger, it was a multimodal corridor study for that entire segment, 6.5 miles, and now we're pulling 1 mile out where we can address school access, high needs for parks, and other considerations to select where we'll do the 1 mile final design. And that's when we'll have better details on what the impacts will look like. Does that help?
It might have made it more confusing.
Yeah.
We tend to do that, I'm sorry.
Maybe don't look at this.
Yeah, we can show you details, yeah.
Other questions? As you go through the ranking part, if you have other questions before you start to rank the projects, come let us know. We're happy to answer any questions. All right? You have this.
Good evening, everyone. Hello again. I really always enjoy seeing our steady eddies in the room, the folks that are showing up each session. Thank you for doing so. Again, my name is Jesse. I'm going to be your facilitator for this evening. For those of you that I haven't had a chance to meet, I am a neutral facilitator, which means that I'm not associated or connected to any of these projects in the room. Really, my goal is to be able to get your feedback, your opinions, your views in terms of what you need within your neighborhood as it pertains to transportation. And so for those of you that have already gone through this exercise in some previous sessions, this will probably sound familiar. We're going to start off with a ranking exercise. You'll see a number of posters that are on the walls throughout the room. Each one of those posters represents the projects that were just presented to all of you. And when I say ready, set, go here in a moment, is what I would like you to do is you're going to have these colored dots here at your table. And each of you will get to have a dot, one of each color, no more than one. There's 5 different colors. And each one of these dots represents your ranking. And when I say that, is what I mean by it is that red dots mean that you are ranking your number one project out of these projects that you just received a presentation on. Your number one is red. And then your second ranked project out of the ones that you just received a presentation is blue. Blue dots are 2. Green dots are your third ranked project. Pink dots are your number 4th ranked project. And teal dots are your number 5th ranked project. So red equals 1, blue equals 2, green equals 3, pink equals 4, and teal equals 5. And if you have any questions on that, feel free to come up and ask me. But you're then going to tear off those dots. Each of you gets a color, no more than 5 colors, 5 picks. And then you're going to go and circulate throughout this room, and you're going to stick your the number that you feel for your project. If you're number 1, so if you see a project that says XYZ, and that's number 1 on your list, you're going to put a red dot on there. XYZ is your number 1 project. And if you see ABC is your number 2, you're going to put a blue dot, your second ranked dot, on that project. So we're going to give you all about 10 minutes or so to circulate through the room. If you are sitting in front of one of these posters, please relocate so that all posters have a chance to have access to them. And then we'll have everybody come back, and there'll be a second portion of the evening that'll include some written feedback. But I'll give you more instructions on that when we're ready to go. Any questions? All right, so we'll give you 10 minutes, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Bye-bye.
As you all received that presentation on these transportation projects, what were some initial thoughts that came to mind when you were watching that presentation? You're hearing about those different projects. What initially came to mind?
It's a hell of a lot of money.
I already got my answer, but it was on VDA, and the fact that Aurora seems to be behind the power curve on it, but it appears that there is an effort to get into compliance.
So a bit of a thinking that we are way behind the ADA, and so there's a big push towards making sure that we are compliant, maybe also making communities more inclusive to those with disabilities, and that was kind of the initial thought that came to mind when we received the presentation.
Yeah.
Is it concerning to you that we're that far behind?
Somewhat. I mean, I'm a disabled veteran, but I don't need to have the ADA requirements. I live in a 55 plus active community, and I'm starting to see people that probably need to make sure that those kind of requirements are out there. So in the newer developments where I am, it's in place, but as I, for example, ride my bike in Highline Canal, or I move about certain areas, I just don't see that. And again, we talked about this, the sidewalks, high priority missing stuff like that. I mean, I'm an outdoor guy. I like to make sure that people have the ability to move around if they want to, and not be constrained to being in a car if they don't have to.
So it's being aware of all these spaces and ensuring that those with disabilities aren't losing by the lack of ADA access. You kind of seem like you're also noting the population that you see that might increasingly be a need. Is that something you feel like that ADA will continue to be an even bigger need in the future as the population grows?
I don't think Aurora is a haven for people. They want to come here because they have a disability. I think they want to come here because it's open and there are outdoor activities. And it's just, I've been here 2 years now. I'm kind of liking this place because it has outdoor activities and there's things to do here for people outside. So if you're not allowing people that have ADA requirements to take advantage of parks or roadways or bike trails, things like that. And again, I know that at the pros one, they talked about the reservoir and the improvements that they're going to do there. So people are starting to think about it now because there is a population out there that needs that.
And it sounds like your feeling is if we don't bring everything up to ADA compliance, we might unintentionally end up excluding those who have disabilities within these magnificent public spaces that you think are important.
I don't think you're going to exclude them. I don't think it's purposely excluding them, and I don't think people will say, I'm not going there because I'm excluded. I think if you forecast it and you start planning for it, it becomes another incentive for people to come to Aurora.
So it just motivates people
Yeah.
to use it because now it's accessible.
Right.
Got it. Understand.
Well, the population in Colorado is aging. State demographer is like, in a few years, we'll have more old folks like me than we will young folks like him. So I think we're behind. I think of a liability issue.
Right.
If somebody gets hit or somebody falls on the sidewalk and gets really hurt and it's because the walker didn't fit, yeah, you're going to get sued. So do you pay it through a lawsuit? I thought about traffic when I was a teen. I'll probably dream about it tonight. But like the speeding in this city, and well through the whole state, is crazy. So anything we can do to kind of add the signals, add those kinds of things that are going to calm down the traffic so that they don't hit us old people will be better.
How many, I'm just curious, show of hands, how many of you have seen speeding as an issue or traffic safety as an issue? Seems like all of you have. And you're also just noting the importance of those safety issues. One thing that I observed in kind of looking at all of the different projects, that while the rankings that you each did varied, it seemed like the one on intersection safety and traffic calming and traffic safety and technology citywide, which you all maybe can't see, this one right next to the pillar, had the most rankings from this group. Does anybody want to speak to kind of their motivation for including those projects or any others? Yeah, Douglas.
Well, yes, I think there is a role for technology in improving particularly safety for pedestrians and bicyclists. And I think, was it at the city council last night, somebody was saying during the public comments period that the voters had voted against red light cameras, so they were objecting to the city council having voted to bring in speed enforcement cameras. There's a difference there, and I think things like speed enforcement cameras, and I mean, to me it makes sense as a way for the city to enforce their traffic laws. And I don't know whether penalizing drivers will really, how effective that will be in the long run in terms of changing driver behavior, but we can hope. and see what happens. So I think there is a role for that, maybe not so much for private corporations, you know, surveilling everybody on the streets and then selling the data. So maybe it's more city-owned cameras, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like you are in support of technology that's used in the right way, that doesn't infringe on privacy rights, but is used to help create better safety within speeding and other traffic issues. And that was influential in you ranking your projects because it is a safety issue and you're in support of that technology.
Yes.
Well, and then speaking to that though, I'm more interested in utilizing prevention rather than punishment. Studies have shown that medians, winding streets, basically lowering visibility on streets functions as a natural traffic calming. You're less likely to see people speeding when there's roundabouts, when there's, you know, rather than punishment. I think that some of the, you know, the intersection, the traffic calming, that type of infrastructure, it's much more passive. It doesn't require nearly as much ongoing investment, and it's less invasive. You know, what you're talking about with privacy, I think that, you know, there's kind of the, you know, the dichotomy of, do we spend the money up front to create a system that naturally promotes this behavior, or do we say this is the rule and then punish people for it?
That's a good point, and I've noticed that, I mean, Denver has been using those plastic bollards in the streets, either of the corners to help shrink the traffic lane, or between separate traffic and bicycle lanes,
Yep.
etc. And I've heard drivers complain vociferously about it because it does make them slow down and drive more carefully. I mean, if you're turning a corner, you have to be
If you live
a
in
little
this
more
area, do
careful.
you drive up and down Central Park Boulevard?
I do not drive. I'm visually impaired, so I can't drive. Well, better not drive.
Talk about safety.
Yes. So, I mean, that's why my focus is on the pedestrian safety side.
So there is a very strong theme here around using intervention or prevention in terms of traffic calming, maybe looking at other tactics that have been used in other cities to help slow down traffic. So I'm hearing that strong theme of safety. Were there any other kinds of needs that were influential in how you ranked or prioritized your projects?
I mean, for me, it was catching up on a lot of the stuff that hasn't been caught up on. I know we need to look at, you know, bridges, like we spoke about, the Alameda Bridge, the Sand Creek Peoria Bridge. I live here in Ward 1, and Peoria is one of my, you know, my regular to get up to I-70, and yeah, that's a horrible choke point, and even just the street through there with as many times as, you know, when they patched in MLK and all that, it just got worse and worse and worse. And yeah, it's...
So it's the same, it's about time we need to,
Right.
that's the saying that kind of comes about, is it's about time that we need to start
Yes.
addressing some of these issues. You seem like you've got experience with some of the problems that they have caused, and that was a key factor in you
Absolutely.
determining how you ranked them.
Looking at things that will have the largest impact, things that have been neglected for the longest to be
Yeah.
brought up to snuff, as well as what things will have the largest impact for the largest number of people.
Okay, so it's also a number of people that will be impacted that also influence.
Thanks for your buck.
Any other?
Well, again, I looked at bang for the buck too, in the sense that some of these things like the signalization, the intersection maintenance, the traffic safety stuff, etc. Those individually, those seem to be rather low-cost projects that, you know, do one intersection or something, but combined together, they spread across the city, and you're serving a lot of people in a lot of places for a lot less money than spending it all on Gun Club Road.
Douglas, I love how consistent you are, because I don't know if you recall, but it was the last session or the one before it, I asked a question around what was the type of thinking that people had and why they ranked something. And in that session, you mentioned serving the most people at the lowest cost. And we had a conversation around return on investment in that exchange. And so it sounds like you're very much using a similar frame of thinking.
It's the same thing, yes, yes. And I did that at one of the other sessions prior to.
Very well understood. Thank you.
No, I have nothing else.
Nothing else?
I had two factors that influenced my decision. The first one was, and that's why I asked about connecting Aurora, having attended all those multimodal presentations and seeing possibly how some of these tie in for safety and ADA compliance, that was one factor. The second one was, I've been to a lot of the council member town halls and mayor town halls, and there have been these fantastic transportation presentations. And I've spoken to the transportation part about that and why they need to do more of that. There's traffic calming, the technology. The mayor had a meeting 2 weeks ago where the police department came in and talked about their technology. So it's unfortunate there's only 5 of us here tonight, 4 of us, because that kind of information is what needs to be shared. People realize what the city's doing and the capabilities that are out there. And frankly, I mean, I had a chance to go to the AMC Palace and walk around and see what happens in their transportation. And now I'm sharing it with my community. So they're aware that there are these capabilities and that there are these things that are occurring. So that helped influence my decision tonight.
Got it. So I heard you start off with the importance of multimodal, and then you also described just how beneficial it's been at some of the different meetings you've been to hear transportation presentations, understand what the needs are, what the city's engaged in, and a recommendation that we need to do more of that in terms of educating the broader public. Got it. Thank you. I'm curious, different question. Were there any projects in transportation that comes to mind that was not in the presentation or on these poster sheets that you feel we as the city should be focused on?
The bus routes. I mean, there's been the discussion about how they're expanding the bus routes and sharing between Aurora and Denver, but there was no discussion about bus routes here.
Can I dig a little deeper on that? Whether it's your comment, Mike, or the rest of the group, do any of you have thoughts or recommendations around public transportation, bus routes, any other types of access points? Is that entering your thinking at all? Is it on your high up needs, or maybe not?
Well, because he does have site issues, that's his main goal.
Yes, and in terms of the infrastructure, which we're talking about tonight, and it seems to me that there may be some areas and places where transit infrastructure can be shared in terms of funding between the city and RTD. I mean, obviously the city and RTD.
Let's wait till Douglas finishes.
I mean, the city and RTD have to work together. But I mean, yes, we pay taxes to RTD for that, but we're not going to pay enough tax to fund full RTD service to every neighborhood in the entire 8-county region, any more than we're going to pay enough taxes for the city to build all of these projects on us. Or if we are, then maybe somebody needs to remember things. But I'm thinking of things like like a bus stop or something where, the shelter for a bus stop, lighting for a bus stop, and even snow removal if we ever get any snow. at those locations, whether there are ways there that the city can be involved in. I think also benefits the city if the stops were cleaner, safer, etc., and people were more interested in riding the bus, then you would reduce traffic on the streets and etc. So there are some transitional or transferable benefits for that.
And it sounds like you're getting very specific recommendations around how we're developing bus stops, or enhancing them, or making them feel more welcoming, more well utilized. You're calling out partnership with RTD in terms of cost sharing, but really looking at where maybe some of those gaps are across the city where residents don't have access to bus transportation, and how the city can focus on some more of that within the capital projects. And Mike, it sounded like you maybe had some thoughts too.
Well, we do pay taxes as residents that are fed into that, so our input should be heard. And that's, I was essentially agreeing with you to say, we should have a voice in this since we're funding part of it through our taxes. And I'm encouraged to see that there's been a focus on transit-oriented development, mainly because we know that study after study after study shows the easiest way to reduce traffic congestion is to improve public transit. If you make it more accessible, more frequent, and make it go where people want to be, it increases ridership, and by increasing ridership, you now lower the cost burden on the municipalities that have to fund it. It's more rider funded, less municipality funded. It's one of those, it's able to feed itself. You make it better, and it continues to improve.
Do you feel, or anyone else in the group feel that if we're able to increase public transportation, reduce traffic, that might also help to address some of the safety issues?
Oh, hugely.
Because that's the theme that we just discussed, right? Safety.
I think so, and Connecting Aurora plans talk about extending the I Love bus line down Jewel out to Glen Club Road. I mean, at this point, it just goes. It would stop at Sable, but and it may take something like, and I think Boulder does a lot of that, where the city is basically subsidizing some of the RTD routes within the city of Boulder. So maybe Aurora needs to look at, when you're starting extending a bus route down Jewel, maybe it needs to be subsidized for the first few years to get enough interest in it. And I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, you're looking at the subsidization model for the bus routes and looking at other cities such as Boulder that might be comparable.
And I don't know whether that falls under service or under capital infrastructure.
Well, sometimes these things are all linked. So I appreciate you sharing that. Were there any other projects that came to mind or focus areas that were not a part of the presentation or on these poster sheets that you felt, in addition to public access to public transportation, that we should be focused on as a city?
Residential sidewalks.
Okay.
I live here in Ward 1, where we have this ancient, outdated, every sidewalk is horrible. And as a result of that, I see on a regular basis, kids, people with mobility devices, they're forced to use the streets. So instead of having safe, protected, an actual walk along the street, they're forced to use the middle of residential streets all the time. And that's, I was having a discussion regarding like some of these projects include modernization of the main corridor routes, but then we've still got a huge amount of other projects that I know some of it is being taken care of with development, requiring any work be brought up to current standards, that type of thing. And I know Denver just went through a major issue on that with their sidewalks, where they were actually asking residents and saying, hey, you need to take care of some of the maintenance too. So I'm wondering if there's appetite for that, or if there's even a push for that in the future.
Yep, so you're calling out the need for sidewalks. I personally appreciate that. I grew up in a neighborhood in Lakewood that was built in the 20s, and there still isn't sidewalks in that neighborhood. And that can also become safety issues. You're describing when you've got children playing, do they have a sidewalk that's safe that they can play on? And so sidewalks seems to be another project that you feel maybe wasn't exactly the focus of any one of these, but something that we should be aware of.
Yeah, it was, the discussion was, it's included with a lot of these projects, but I think that the overhaul needs to be larger than just specific corridors.
Yeah.
It needs to be,
It's sort of like the street replacement project, but for sidewalks.
yes, yep.
The existing sidewalks.
Yeah, the integrated sloped curb model 2.5 foot wide sidewalks that we have here in Ward 1, I assume you guys, you have them. You can't use them. I want to walk, if I want to walk from my house to Peoria, I walk in the street because the sidewalks are so bad, they're so narrow, and I'll be honest, code enforcement isn't really able to keep up on top of how bad it really is. When it gets iced over, when it gets, trash, landscape rocks falling out onto it, it just becomes impassable. And because of how narrow it is, it's not really an option.
And you're calling out us not just focusing on one particular neighborhood with regards to this, but really citywide. Did you have something that you wanted to add? No? Okay. I thought I heard you say something. Okay.
You just wish.
I just wish. So, how many of you, show of hands, if the projects that you ranked in your top 3 were on a bond package and that you were voting on, how many of you would support that bond package? What if it was also your 4th and 5th, your top 5? How many of you would support? So you all feel pretty strongly about your top 5. How many of you wish that you had 10 dots, and that you could have prioritized 10 projects? Yes? Okay.
You asked this before. I think we all answered the same way at the last meeting.
And it's a valid point, because if I don't see hands go up, that means that maybe you all didn't feel so strongly about your number 6, your number 7, and your number 8 projects. But it sounds like you do, if you were given the chance to rank them. Is there any other thoughts or recommendations that you want to share with regards to transportation before we close out the evening?
I do have a little bit of a bone to pick. The light rail route through Aurora, particularly where it diverges from the freeway. I think that was kind of ill thought and ill planned, because we've had multiple derailments, and it changes what is a high-speed transit system to a low-speed transit system for a very short route. As someone, I worked down in DTC. I worked in DTC for a while, and I loved having the option of getting on the light rail, except for that section, because it really kind of detracts away from the entire rest of the light rail. Is that short detour away, where it's now a low-speed corridor that has had incidents, like multiple derailments, collisions. It just strikes me as is this something that we can maybe go back and rethink at some point as part of our transportation overhaul?
What would your recommendation be?
Keep it along the freeway. If we need a transit center in Aurora, there's a huge empty mall parking lot right there. Literally 3 blocks on the other side of the mall from where the current transit center is, that could serve just as well.
To look at other spaces that might be able to streamline
like I said, that parking lot, aside from when the carnival's in town, is empty all the time.
All right. Just so you know, you don't see me taking notes, but Jaleesa sitting behind you is taking notes. So we are taking notes of everything that you're describing. Is there any other last thoughts that the group wants to share with regards to transportation?
I think you've done a really good job. Yeah. I just want to know when gun club's going to get done. I'm kind of tired of hearing about, oh, gun club, we got to do.
And I will say in a validating way that when Laura presented all of the feedback that we got from residents last year through surveys and in-person facilitations, Gun Club Road in bold letters was one that we heard frequently from you.
Well, remembering that most of us probably, I don't know where you live, but like, I'm in Ward 1 in Arapahoe. I don't travel gun club. So it's not a high priority for me. For folks who live there, I'm sure it is.
Yes, and some of these needs in every focus area can be specific to a neighborhood, and some of them can also be citywide. And it's okay for us to try to focus on both, but also understand the difference between those. And I actually appreciate you advocating for a community that you don't live directly in, but is affected by a really congested road that has not been able to catch up to the size of the population that's not living there. All right. Yes.
I did love hearing the fact that, North Aurora is not better than southern parts of Florida. I was a smoke area. But I'd love to hear the gentleman that said he moved here a couple of years ago. Would you mind sharing where you came from?
Northern Virginia, and I lived there for 35 years because I was in the Marine Corps, and came out here because my wife said the grandkids are out here. I'm enjoying it now. And I was going to bring up, the whole point about this light rail stuff, because where'd she go? Janine, she's from Northern Virginia too. I'd like to see the light rail more like the subway and the metro in DC.
Metro's fantastic.
Yeah, so, but I don't want to take all this time.
That's totally fine. I lived in
By the way,
Manhattan.
thank you for that. I was curious.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I lived in Manhattan for 7 years, even though I grew up in Lakewood. And I'll tell you that even the metro areas that have some of the oldest and most
Yeah.
developed transportation, you talk to New Yorkers how they feel about the subway, they'll probably give you an earful too.
Yeah.
But we have a lot
But
of
they use it.
they use
Oh, yeah.
it, and we have a lot of work to do here in the metro.
Yeah, I moved here from Portland.
Oh, did you?
Which, yeah, they put a lot heavier focus on light rail transit, auto blocks, so, basically to improve safety, but also to increase speed of transit on longer routes.
Yes.
Essentially, they use a hub feeding model where the majority of buses feed into the light rail for longer transit sections, for longer transit, and then and then you also have the shorter routes within a community on the buses.
Yep.
Just more
Yeah,
of
there's-
a integrated design.
Well,
lot
I
of
moved
different-
here from Iowa, and they don't have subway. They don't have buses where I grew up.
Yeah.
And in my hometown, we still don't have a stoplight.
Yeah.
We do have stop signs, and we have calming traffic. The tractors slow you down.
Yes.
So,
Everybody's
that was
got
50 years ago.
everybody's got different backgrounds, and I think there are different cities that we can use as comparisons and look to for. That's been also a theme, whether it's Boulder or Portland or Virginia or Iowa. Just looking at other comparable models. So thanks for pointing that out.
But you do see it, like I joke about Iowa, but when you come through Des Moines, they have the same issues with the traffic and the way they've skirted around the city. It's crazy.
All right, well, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you for your time and your input. I'm going to collect all of your written feedback. We're also going to collect your prioritization. And with that, I'm just going to turn it back over to Laura. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you all.
All right.
For spending time with us. So I